and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. I am, as always, delighted to be with you on this Tuesday, the first of two episodes we have this week, the first of two author interviews I have for you this week. As we get started, I would like to remind you, as I always do, to please like, follow, subscribe on whatever platform you are listening to or watching this episode on. That really does help the algorithm to get the podcast out to more readers such as yourselves. Also, if you want to support not only this podcast, but the entire network in a different way, you can go to gsmcpodcast.info. You see that in the video playing next to me, and there you can leave a tip or a donation. If you want to also leave a question or a comment with that tip or donation, you can do that. I would be happy to engage with anything that you have for me to comment on or answer questions. That would be great. I'll do that at the beginning of an episode after I receive said question or comment. But you can also just go and leave a tip or donation at gsmcpodcast.info. Like I said, that helps not only this podcast, this podcast, but the entire network as a whole. Thank you, as always, for all of the support that you give. It is greatly appreciated, whatever form that support comes in. So how is your week going? Last week was the 4th of July. Did you get a long weekend? It was obviously July 4th here, but it's not the 4th of July, because I'm not in the US, so it's not celebrated in Portugal, obviously. My husband and I acknowledged it and celebrated it in our own way, but my heart is always on Flathead Lake on the 4th of July. My grandmother's sister, my mom's mom, my grandmother's sister and her husband bought a little island on Flathead Lake a million years ago, I think in the 50s, but I could be wrong. So it's been decades, like 70 years. And they started having a family reunion on this little island on Flathead Lake every year. And that's where I grew up going every year. It could be freezing. I mean, there's a picture of my sister with a winter coat and mittens on one year on the island. Or it could be beautiful, 90 degrees, and you're swimming in the lake and you're happy. But my immediate family is very, very small. No cousins on my mom's side, no first cousins, only 4 on my dad's, but this family reunion is on my mom's side. But grandmother's older sister is the one that bought the island. There's 6 siblings in that family, and then it was their mother who was the oldest of 9 siblings, I want to say. Like the decades, I could be getting that wrong, but all of those siblings, children, grandchildren, etc., came to the family reunion, and so I got to learn how all of those generational relationships worked. My second cousin twice removed, my third cousin, etc. I learned all of that, and I loved it. I loved knowing how everybody fit into that family tree. So even though once I became an adult and I started going other places on the 4th of July, I think I've been off the island on the 4th as many more years than I've been on the island. That's where my heart always is, on the 4th of July. Very nostalgic. And this year, my little heart grew 4 sizes this year because my great nephew had his first 4th of July on the island, and he's so cute. He's 5 months old, and so he got to have his first 4th of July island experience. Wish I could have been there, but pictures will have to do. So at any rate, just thought I would share that with you. Do want to, of course, move on to the interview, which is why we are here. This week I am talking to Kimberly G. Giarratano about her book, Devil in Profile. This book is the second book in the Billie Levine mystery series. Let me give you the description of this book. Unlicensed PI Billie Levine is trying to bank some extra cash, so she picks up hours working as a process server for another investigative firm. Mindless and mostly 9 to 5, Billie is content to simply hand over court documents until, during a routine stakeout, she stumbles upon the corpse of an elderly man, an art collector with ties to Nazi Germany. Compared to Billie, the dead man has it easy. Billie is feeling on edge lately. Maybe it's because her father is insisting his estranged kids come to his wedding in Sedona, or that her brother David is making plans to move out, or that a smug teaching assistant is getting underfoot on her latest case. Although it's possible she could use the help when the cops zero in on Billy's boyfriend Aaron and his connections to an international art ring. Turns out Aaron's stint in Israel has left him with more than just a thick scar across his neck. The woman he screwed over wants revenge, and she's determined to leverage Billy's murder case to get it. With the detectives focused on Aaron, Billy sets her sights on stopping a killer who is tying up loose ends, Billy being one of them. That is the description of, as I said, Devil in Profile, the second in the Billie Levine mystery series. I read this one. I have not read the first one. And I will say that it can be read as a standalone. I read it as a standalone. I always prefer to start at the beginning of a series. I would say you should start at the beginning, because why not? If you can read one book, why not read two? They're both out, right? And I did feel at the beginning that there was a lot of backstory that I was missing that was being referenced from that first book. By the time I got maybe halfway through and then through the end of the book, I did feel like I was sufficiently caught up. I kind of had an idea of what happened in that first book, but I would suggest starting at the beginning, just because, as Julie Andrews said, it's a very good place to start, right? But I really liked the book. It was fast-paced. It was a lot of fun. It's thriller, mystery, but not too, it's not going to keep you up at night. It's not, you know me, and my eek factor. It is Sarah approved on the eek factor scale. I should actually make one of those and give you actual numbers. But like I said, fast-paced. Billy is young. She makes some choices that, as the reader, you're thinking, why? But I'm looking forward to watching her grow as a character. There's at least 3 books in the series, so see how she grows. Next book, if there's more, great. But there's a really fun cast of secondary characters that have a lot of quirks and foibles, and they play off of Billy's personality as she's making sometimes questionable choices. But she's also a young person with a lot of pressure on her in terms of family relationships and her relationship with her boyfriend and job, etc., etc. So she's got a lot that she's working through. At any rate, let's go ahead now and turn to the interview. Again, the book is called Devil in Profile. The author is Kimberly G. Giarratano. Hi, Kimberly. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm excited to have you here. We're going to talk about the second book in your Billie Levine series. But before we get to the series and the book, if you wouldn't mind taking just a few moments to share a little bit about yourself so my listeners can get to know you.
Sure. My name is Kimberly Giarratano. I am the author of Mysteries for Teens and Adults. I am also the author of the Billie Levine series. There's 2 books right now, Death of a Dancing Queen and Devil in Profile. I am the chapter liaison for the National Board for Sisters in Crime, one of the largest crime fiction writing organizations in the entire world. I live in the Poconos. I'm originally from New Jersey, but I live in the Poconos, and I live with a lot of nature. You know, I see porcupines and turkeys and deer and bears, just part of my everyday. And I have 3 children, and I teach part-time as well.
Nice. The Poconos, I don't know. I always think of the Poconos in like movies and just someplace that people go. I've never, people live there obviously, but I in my brain, people always go to the Poconos.
They used to, and then they just started to live here. So I live in a community where the houses are all different. I don't live in a typical like subdivision where like there's just different models of the homes. All of the houses are different because they've all been commissioned and built. Some of them started out as little bungalows, vacation bungalows for like Manhattanites. And then as like time went on, people relocated here and started just building larger homes to live in. So yes, it used to be like part of where I live has old honeymoon resorts that have been bought up by the government and converted into like national parks and things like that. Not national, state parks.
Right.
The Delaware Water Gap is like a region. But anyway, yeah. So now people just live here, including myself.
Yeah, interesting. But nature is good. That's nice. I mean,
yeah, I love it.
So the books, this one is the second with the main character of Billie Levine. Can you just start by giving an overview of the series as a whole?
Sure. I liken Billie Levine to an East Coast Jewish Veronica Mars. She's 24 years old. She's a private investigator. She works under her grandpa, and she lives in New Jersey because that's where I grew up, in New Jersey. And it's set in North Jersey, which has a really great kind of hard-boiled noir vibe. If you've ever been to North Jersey, you know what I'm talking about, especially like the east part of the state. And she is also taking care of her mother who has early onset Alzheimer's disease. So she's a young woman take with huge responsibilities, and one of those is caring for a parent that unfortunately is being ravaged by this disease. But there's a lot of humor in it. It's not like a downer. Nobody's going to read it and go like, "Whew, that was a lot." You're going to
Right.
laugh. It's joyful, but it's also, it's a page turner. It's everything I like in books, so I
Right.
write it to my standards. I don't want anybody to leave going, "Whew, that was a slog."
Right.
What did it? Um, So I have a lot of fun. I have a lot of fun writing her. I have a lot of fun with her crimes, like what she's solving, the scrape she gets into. It's a lot of fun, I
Yeah.
promise.
And I like that you likened it to Veronica Mars because she actually takes some time in the second book to watch Veronica Mars. And she has opinions, of course, but
Like, oh, let's just put Veronica Mars in it.
exactly.
I had so much fun with that.
The first one is something with Dancing Queen. I apologize.
Yes,
Thank
Death
you.
of a Damsel.
Yes. And then the second one, Devil in Profile. That's the one that we are talking about, the newest one. So can you give an overview of this story and what Billie is getting up to?
Devil in Profile has an art bent to it. So um, Billie is a private investigator, but she takes on some hours as a process server for another firm. So process servers are the ones that like serve papers, like Mr. Jones, you've been served, like that kind of thing. So she has to serve papers to an elderly man, a recluse, and he doesn't come out of his house. So it's kind of like a challenge for her. But anyway, there's a reason he doesn't come out of his house because he's dead. And she stumbles upon his body, and it turns out he's a hoarder, and he also has ties to Nazi Germany. So I got to have a lot of fun with researching Nazi looted art. Makes like a whole, it's a whole theme in the book because I had read an article in the Atlantic about an elderly gentleman who was the son of Hildebrand Gerlit, who was one of Hitler's art collectors in quotes, art thieves.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm saying. And he would sell off pieces of the art every once in a while to just pay his bills. Like he was hoarding the art that his father had left him, that he'd stolen after the Third Reich fell. And he would sell the art for cash just to pay his bills, like every so often. So he got caught on a train from Munich to Switzerland with all this cash on him, and the authorities got suspicious as to why he had all this money, and they started looking into his tax records and how this sort of story was discovered. So I used that as inspiration for Devil in Profile. So all the art mentioned in the book is real. I didn't make up any paintings. I didn't make up any artists. Like that's all real. So I had a lot of fun with that historical time period. I was like so inspired. I was like, oh my God, I have to put this in a book. And voila, I did. And of course, then Billie's running from, European gangs, and she gets into massive amounts of trouble. And it was just a joy to write her, watch her try to climb out of these situations. I'm like, and as the
So
writer, I got to do this. I got to get her out of here. She's not like,
yes.
I'm not watching her. I have to make it so that she can get out of this. And I was like, what did I do?
So you're one of those authors that likes to put your characters into. You're mean, apparently. Or yeah, you to your characters. Is that what I'm hearing?
I tendency to make them suffer. And I've been told that. I'm like, Giarratano really puts the kitchen sink into making her character suffer. And it's like, I do, but they'll be okay. It's
So
just
yeah,
fun.
right. But then that is the flip side. You've put her into this situation. Now, Kimberly, you have to get her out. So
Yeah. And I
are
can't
you
do it.
a plotter or a pantser? Do you know how she's getting out of these things before you get her into them, or is it just kind of figuring it out as you go?
I plot everything, but that doesn't mean I know everything when I write. So I plot things out. I'm like, all right, this scene will lead to this scene, will lead to this scene, and so forth. But then I get into the scene and I don't exactly necessarily know how things will unfold. Like I have to figure it out. So I'm not that, I mean, I plot pretty heavily, but like the intricacies of a scene, that just comes from the writing itself. And sometimes I discover things. I'm like, oh, like in my third book, I'm like, oh, I threw in a character I had not intended for. I was like, but I like this. I'm going to keep it. So it could, you plan and then, you write and then you're like, ugh, what did I do? So.
Yeah. I love how often authors talk about characters either surprising them or showing up where they're least expected. Here we have an entirely new character that wasn't planned on and just decided, you know what, I really need to be in your book. I think that's great. I I I project, of course, whenever I talk to authors, and I don't know how I would feel if just a whole new character showed up. Would I be excited? Would I be like freaking out a little bit? I'm not sure. There's a new character that just showed up. My dog who wants in the bedroom because she should have gone in when I told her to. At any rate, let's go ahead and take our first break of this episode. When we come back, we'll be talking more about characters and character development, how that works for Kimberly. You are tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Mm-hmm. 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 Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to work, cause my boss is a jerk, and I'm not even that paid. I need a change in my life, cause I don't feel alive, and there's nothing that makes me happy. Hold my beer for a minute, I'm about to quit my job, cash in for a ticket. I'm going on a trip and I don't plan to visit. I'm gonna stay there till I feel like I'm winning, and this is just the beginning. I need a big change, help me feel like living. I need a big swing, home runs I'm hitting, and I'll never look back, moving on till I get it all. And we all got dreams, we all want things, but what you gonna do for it? How you gonna move for it? What you gonna be? And do you believe you can do anything? Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with author Kimberly G. Giarratano. Before the break, we were talking about characters and how they sometimes just appear out of nowhere. As we get into segment 2, I do want to remind you that you can support Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my conversation with Kimberly G. Giarratano. As we go into this second segment, I do want to remind you that you can support the podcast and the entire network by going to gsmcpodcast.info. You can leave a tip or a donation. You can leave a question and comment with that tip or donation. I'm happy to engage with any comments or questions you might have for me. Again, that's gsmcpodcast.info. It helps not only this podcast, but the network as a whole. And as I say, hopefully every time, thank you for all the support that you give in whatever form that support takes. So before the break, Kimberly was talking about a character that kind of appeared out of nowhere, which leads into the next part of our conversation where we are talking more about characters and character development. Let's go ahead and return to that conversation with Kimberly. I would assume then that kind of you answered my next question a little bit in terms of character development. You probably have a pretty good idea of those characters going in, but then sometimes you're surprised either with a new character or characters doing things you weren't fully expecting. Is that accurate?
Yeah, my characters live with me for a bit. I think about them a lot. I don't necessarily just go through life going, oh, what would Billie do in this situation? Because life doesn't even present the situations Billie gets herself into. But I think about my characters quite often. Like they just travel with me. I'm driving. I think about them and, a scene and what they would do. And so they're fully formed, I think, when I get to the page. What usually surprises me, and it's not so much about their characterization, but maybe who else I bring along for the ride. Or I develop I create a character because I feel like they would be a great foil, or they'd be a great partner, or they would bring some interest. And so that's really where my subconscious kind of was like, she needs a friend here, she needs like a partner, she needs the nemesis. And that's when I'll bring them in. But yeah, my characters come they mostly come fully formed, my main ones. Sometimes peripheral characters need more development, and I haven't given them the headspace. So then I have to really sit down and think about that.
And are you cognizant when you write peripheral characters, because they all have there's some very colorful secondary characters in this book, some characters that make you just kind of want to flick them in the forehead. But are you really cognizant about making sure that their characteristics further Billie's story in some fashion?
Yes, like everybody should have a purpose and a point. Um, there's like no fat, I want to say, sometimes when they're writing. And I have a lot of characters in my novels. I read that constantly from readers. They're like, there's so many characters in this novel. I like a large cast. I think they all bring something and allow me to explore the themes that I want to explore, or allow me to like just explore Billie's world through their eyes. So I have a lot of fun bringing in different viewpoints. Also, she lives in North Jersey. It's a very diverse, crazy place to
Mm-hmm.
live. It's just how it is. I would be so interested to know sometimes what characters resonate with readers a lot. Like I know Gramps is popular because I love writing him. He's so much
Mm-hmm.
fun, our grandfather. And but I would always be curious to know like what characters you want to flick in the forehead. Is it just like the villainous ones? Because that I totally get, and they should be kind of like, go away. But then I don't have the conflict. I don't have like the impetus
Right.
for it.
Right.
But
Well, I mean, I
yeah,
think I think it's the characters you want Billie to conflict with, like Jeremy in this case. They're just
yeah,
meant to butt heads, or just even some like and Billie herself she's young. You can tell she's young, and she has not quite developed that ability to tact. She has not developed tact yet, and that could be young
I,
and maybe partly North Jersey. I don't know, but there's times when you're like, Billie, seriously, there's a conversation, and I can't think his name. Billy is the guy at the storage unit with the birds, and she really could have finessed that a lot better. She did not.
yeah. You know what? Part of it is just a New Jersey. It's not that New Jerseyans don't have tact. We just don't have time to be tactful.
Right.
Just get it out. What do you want from me? It feels like a very Jersey way to kind of go through life. But yeah, I didn't filter at 24. I would just say whatever I was thinking, and it was never, it comes like tact, it comes with age. It comes with,
Sometimes.
I think it does, right. I definitely become more polite as I get older, and I think, okay, how do I handle this situation in a better way? But at 24, I did not, and neither should
No,
Billy.
no. And
I,
at 24, you think you're right a lot more than
yeah,
you really. So,
it's so fun to write. First of all, it's so fun to write baddies. So the more sinister the character, the more fun I'm having. And it is fun to kind of watch her manipulate situations to her advantage as well. And then having to like, deal with the consequences of that, and how she does have to be like, wait, I gotta smooth this. I gotta be a little more suave. And I don't know. I have so much fun. And then I get to write funny one-liners, which I also enjoy. So
sure. Yeah. And it means, I mean, you've got to have, it gives her a place to start. And then, I mean, I'm excited to find out. You just watch her progress, because she will start, figuring things out more as she goes on. Which brings me to the next question of: do you have an endpoint in mind, or are you just going to write as long as Billie keeps giving you stories? How is that looking for you, the series?
I mean, reality is I write Billie as much as my publisher will give me. There's 3 books contracted for Billie right now. So the third book, Make a Killing, will be out June of 2025. So the draft is in. I'm just waiting on it. It's like, that's like the boring author part. And, I don't know about readers, but like in order for series to keep going, readers just have to invest, and they have to be willing to read, new books, and, tell their friends about them and put it on social media. Like word of mouth really helps authors out. I mean, that's the reality of it, that we are not a we are not Netflix. We can't throw all our books out at once and have people
Yeah.
binge. They are contracted book by book. So
Yeah.
right now I'm contracted for 3. Make a Killing was also like, they're always so much fun to write. Like, and I try to use humor and suspense as a way to kind of discuss themes that I'm interested in. So in Devil in Profile, like there's a lot of Billie and her father.
Hmm.
There's a lot of like parents and their children is a big theme. And in the third book I'm writing, I'm exploring like toxicity in corporate America is one of the things that I'll be kind of exploring. So I usually pick something that's meaningful to me that I want to talk about, but in, doing so in a way that's accessible and entertaining and fun and kind of gets my point across as well.
Yeah, and that's what you were talking about. It's not. It is a heavy topic, like parenting and your parent-child relationship. And Billie's is not great with her father, but she. I like that you put her in a situation with Titus, where she's suddenly counseling him on dealing with his toxic parent, and she just,
Yeah.
10 pages ago was completely floundering. So
Yeah, she's like, oh wait, I got this. I could
yeah,
I could you because I'm working through all of this myself. So
exactly.
yeah, and it's again, so that's an example, I think, of when I'm writing and I'm drafting that like I don't see this character on the edge coming through, but then they do come through and I'm like, ah, they support, the whole they support the theme of what I'm trying to do and they sneak themselves in and I was like, oh, this works out great. Like, yes. And then sometimes they'll bring a character and I'm like, what am I doing? I get rid of them or I delete, just delete. God
Yeah,
bless the delete. But yeah, yeah, I like that. And so I sometimes it's all subconscious. Like I don't realize I'm doing it until I'm like,
sure.
for me.
What is it, do you think, that draws you to writing crime fiction, mysteries, etc.?
I was talking to somebody about I was in a book club for my own book. Anyway, it mysteries give me or give my characters, I always say, something to do while they're figuring themselves out.
Hmm.
So I feel like a good crime fiction just provides a great plot, avenue for them to tackle while they're discovering their character arc and, overcoming their flaw. I was I was joking that I don't know what I would write about if it wasn't that they had to solve something. Like what are they doing? What's a
Right.
scene look like? It's
Right.
not like I need to or I'm interrogating a suspect or, I need to run from some. I just don't know what they would do with themselves. So it's just what I wound up writing. Like my first novel that I wrote, Grunge Gods and Graveyards, which is a young adult mystery. I had set out to write a book. I wanted to pay homage to 90s alternative music because that's what I grew up on.
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, I can't just write a love story to 90s grunge. I have to tell a story. And so this sort of ghost story mystery unfurled. And it was my first novel that I started and finished and revised. It took me like 6 months to revise. I took a pace, like a pace your own class kind of thing, and I revised it. And I just realized I'm like, oh, I'm pretty good at creating these twisty mysteries and dropping in clues. Like I'm pretty good at this. I didn't know at the time. And now that I've been doing it for 10 years, it's just a natural avenue I find for me to tell a story.
Sure. So you actually kind of combine plot-based novels with character-driven novels, because the characters are growing. You mentioned their arc and they're figuring things out. That's the character-driven side, but you've got the plot actually giving them some avenue to tell their story.
I feel like plot gives these characters momentum. It gives them agency.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you could just be sitting around having a discussion. I don't know what happens. And I read other genres. It's not like I read historical fiction, but there's always something that they're trying to get.
Yeah.
I just find that the mystery for me makes it, we're trying to get a killer. Like we're trying to figure out who killed somebody. I just
Right.
feel like it's for me when I'm writing, I'm like, that is like a very concrete thing to discover. So, um, it works. But in 10 years I could write something else. I could write where they just sit around and talk. I don't know, but something has to happen. So I
Yes.
just much easier for me to think, we're looking for a killer. That's what's happening. That's
Right.
what we're doing.
But we've all read the books where they sit around and talk and it works brilliantly. And we've all read the books where they sit around and talk and you're like, dear God, why is nothing happening?
Yeah, and that comes down to, you know what? I don't even know the magical formula anymore. I was talking to an author friend of mine, and I had just finished a bestseller. I don't read a lot of New York Times bestsellers. It's just because I don't know why. I just don't, maybe because they're not available at my library. They're always on hold, so I never get
Right.
around to it. I just finished this New York Times bestseller. I couldn't put it down. I couldn't put it down. I was reading it at the bus stop. I was reading, and I sometimes like nowadays I'm like, what's on my phone? Like, I know I should be reading, but I'm scrolling mindlessly. I couldn't put this book down. I took it with me everywhere. It was a page turner, so much drama. The writing was not exceptional by any means. And I would never dog on another author, so I will never say the name, but I was not floored by the voice. Let's just put it that way. I was not like, wow, this author's voice is really something. It wasn't. The story was so good that I didn't care about the narrative style at all. I just found myself not caring. I was like, what's going to happen next? It was just that good. So I don't know where I'm going with the story, except to say, I sometimes you're right. You can sit around and read a passage and they're just chit-chatting, and you're like, I could listen to them talk about a menu for 300 pages. I am
Mhm.
so like into the characters and the author's narrative style. Just do it. And then other times, it's the story has to carry. There has to be action, there has to be movement. I have to see this character doing crazy things or living this dramatic life. Otherwise, I'm just not invested. But and so I don't know. I think we had like a sad conversation, my friend and I were on. Sometimes I guess story trumps everything because as writers, we're so cognizant of how we craft sentences and how our voice comes into things. And so to realize like it didn't matter as long as there was a lot of drama. He
Mm.
was, huh? Hmm, maybe I don't need to edit this sentence 5 times, as long as I put her in some crazy situation. But
Right. But again, you have to find what works best for you.
I have to be pleased with my product,
Yes.
100%.
So you mentioned edits for book 3 for Billie. Are you working on another work in progress at the moment as well?
I am. So I'm contracted for 3 books for Billy right now. So I'm working on something else until I see what happens with that. I'm writing a historical mystery set in 1951 Manhattan. So I've been researching like everything. When you write historical fiction, everything has to be researched. We
Mhm.
think, oh, the clothing, the way they spoke. This is set in Manhattan. Like she takes a taxi. I need to know what the taxi looks like. She takes
Mhm.
a subway car. What line? What did they call the subway? They didn't use tokens in 1951. So now I'm like, when did they I know they stopped using tokens roughly. When did they start using tokens? Not 1951. So, they stop at their, a hotel. What is the hotel? Riverside Plaza Hotel I picked. So now I have to research that. I have books on U.S. Army nurses in World War II, baseball in the 40s and 50s. Bellevue Hospital is a setting, so I had to get a book on that. I had to research, World War II, soldiers during World War II, particularly North Africa, I was looking into. So everything has to be researched. You read a ton, you put in a little, but because
Mhm.
otherwise, I don't know. I need to know what a scene looks like before I
Yep.
can draft. And it's not just what does the room look like, it's what's the vibe. And Bellevue is a good example. She goes to Bellevue Hospital. What did Bellevue look like? I didn't even reading this whole book, I didn't even really get a good image of what Bellevue looks like, but it's just I got a great history of it. So, and then
Yeah.
writing notes. Anyway, that's what I'm working on. So I have like 20,000 words drafted, but the history is probably, I mean, researching the history is really fun, but I'm like,
Yeah.
how do I get seamlessly so it doesn't seem like I'm giving you a report that I'm telling?
As you know, if you've been following the podcast for a while, do love historical fiction, and Manhattan in the early 50s sounds like a really fun time to set a book. As I mentioned, I love old movies. My husband and I love to watch old movies, and especially Christmas time, New York in the 50s always feels really fun and nostalgic. So I probably would get sucked into many, many rabbit holes of research, just trying to get all the details of that time period right. Maybe wouldn't even write a book because that sounds like so much fun to research. At any rate, we are going to take our second break of the podcast. When we come back, we'll be talking a little bit more about research in general. You're tuned in to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my interview with author Kimberly G. Giarratano. Before the break, she was talking about her work in progress, which is set in Manhattan in the early 50s. I was fangirling a little bit about the time frame. Let's go ahead now and return to that conversation with Kimberly. Whenever authors talk about research, I feel like I don't know. I don't feel bad exactly, but I kind of feel bad for authors because I know you have so much more information that you could give me. And I know that I don't necessarily want to read that in the book that you're giving me, but like you've done so much research, you know so much more than the tiny little snippet you can put into the book from the hours of research you do.
I heard a fantasy author on a podcast say that historical fiction and fantasy, like high fantasy, are sort of like crafted from the same cloth, which is intense world building. And I thought that was really smart. I'm reading historical fiction right now by Helen Simonson. It's the Hazelbourne Ladies Motorcycle and Aviation Club. It's a long title. It's set in 1919 England, right at the end of World War I. It is so immersive, and she does it seamlessly. It's a great example of historical fiction done really well. Like, I'm so impressed with it. It's taking me forever to read because I wound up dissecting every sentence the way she does things. She slips in historical details. Like, my new thing as an author is to see how many times I'm using the word it, because it's just like, to me, like there are days where I can't avoid it. I gotta use the word it. But take it out. Can I put a better word in? Can I be more so that's like maybe that's interesting to other authors, probably not to readers. But anyway, that's what I and her book, I'm like, she didn't use it once on this entire page. Every word is so precise and meaty and perfect. She is a good example of someone to read if you're looking how to kind of incorporate the historical details into the narrative so it reads really nice. So that's what I've been doing. But yeah, it's a lot of research, and you want to create the world. Like, I'm trying to build this world with the historical details. And 1951 is tricky because there will be readers who are like, I was alive in 1951, and they may feel like something doesn't ring true, or everybody's experiences are different. And I am trying to incorporate a lot of it's my love letter to New York City. It's my love letter to my ancestors and my husband's side of the family, Italians and Jews who came to New York City to make better lives.
Yeah.
So that's
well, and Manhattan is so iconic, and there are so many movies set in Manhattan in that time period. So people, whether they were alive or not, are going to have something in their head because, if they watch a lot of old movies like my husband and I do, so yeah.
Very good point.
In terms of writing, you've been writing, you said, for about 10 years. Is it something that you always wanted to do? Did you decide, what was that journey like for you in terms of writing for publication?
So I've been a published author for 10 years. I started writing fiction when I was a young adult librarian, which was about 2007. I became a YA librarian. And at that time, Twilight was huge. Vampire novel. Speculative fiction and YA was huge, and publishers were taking everything because there was just this explosion of interest in teen fiction that adults were reading and teens were reading. And a lot of the times these publishers, it was a gluttony of riches, and a lot of what they were publishing was not great. And I was reading it all because I was buying it for the library.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, I think I could do this, because I went into college as a journalism major. I always was writing for my newspapers, high school newspaper. I was an editor at my college newspaper. And then I was a history major. So I was always writing nonfiction is what it wound up being. And when I was a librarian, I know it's terrible to think you read a terrible book and you're like, oh, I can do this. How hard can this be? I mean, it's hard. Kim
right. Yeah.
2000 Kim did not know. 2007 Kim didn't know. It's hard. But I tried NaNoWriMo. I read every book on craft I could find. I took like a cheap class on scenes, whatever. And then I joined Sisters in Crime in 2014, where I am on the board. And that has kind of given me my education. So I always was writing. I just didn't know, I didn't think I could write fiction because I thought you needed an MFA. I thought you needed to take college classes to be a writer. I always had in my head, like, in order to do anything, you have to have a lot of education in it. But it became, independent education, self-taught, reading, taking books apart, taking classes, learning. And now, I'm 10 years into it. Not that I have my own system, I'm always tweaking things, but I'm so much more confident in what I'm doing. Like, I'm very sure of myself
Sure.
in this thing of life. I am sure of myself. So yeah, that's the long story to a quick question.
No, that's great. Out of all of that experience, then I know it's hard to kind of take one thing out of your experience, but what advice would you give for someone who wants to write?
Read widely, obviously, all authors say that. Read everything. You should read everything. But also take your favorite book, the one that you cannot live without, the one that you reread all the time, and just dissect it. What does the author do 10 pages in that, or where is the scene where I'm like, oh, it's so amazing? Or what are the characters like that I can't, live without? What's the narrative style? I'm not saying you have to copy your favorite author's narrative style, but what is it about the way they write that draws you in? I would suggest like a case study of your favorite novel for sure. And reading as a writer is not really enjoyable sometimes. That's why I read out the genre a lot. Because I read I don't like when chefs, work full time and they don't want to cook for themselves,
Yep.
kind of how sometimes it feels to read, because I'm like wanting to dissect sentences. One of my favorite authors is Mick Herron. He writes the Slow Horses books. It's an Apple TV show. It's so good. His ability, his way with language and his humor and his characterization are just outstanding. It takes me forever to read one of his novels because I can't stop dissecting it and like, oh my God, look how he does it here, and look at the scene, and look how he creates these characters. And some of these characters, some of them are beloved, some of them are terrible, but I'm so absorbed by them. So it just becomes work when I read. But that's what I would suggest somebody looking to write a novel is like, take it apart and see if you can put it together. And yeah, and analyze the hell out of a book that you love and why you love it. It might take the fun out of rereading it again. You'd be like, oh, especially when you read your own work and you're like, I didn't do this thing I should have made it better.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're going to do that whatever you're doing. It's that you always are your own worst critic.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah.
You've mentioned a few of the authors that you like to read. When you're not reading for research and you're just reading for you, what are some of your go-to authors and genres?
Oh, Holly Black, my all-time favorite author. She's from Jersey. She writes young adult, and now she has an adult book out too. Book of Night. It's on my shelf somewhere. I don't actually buy a lot of books, like physical books anymore. I am a library user. I was a librarian. My library will buy books if I ask them to. Heads up, everyone, if you're not aware of this, your library will purchase books that you want to read. You just ask them, because you want to read it, other people want to read it. So, and I ask my library to buy books all the time so that I can enjoy them, and then they go into circulation, other people can enjoy them. So that's what I do. But Holly Black is one of my most favorite authors in the entire universe. She writes the very popular The Cruel Prince, the Folk of the Air series. She writes a lot about fairies and fae. And she's a Jersey girl. She lives in Massachusetts. I met her in person once, many, many years ago, and I was so excited. I was an adult. I felt like I was meeting a rock star. I really love her so much. I like Maggie Steve. Go ahead.
Oh, she kind of has rock star hair too. I don't think she ever has the same color hair anytime I see her.
In general, I would just love to hang out with her. I met an author who knows her, and I was like, tell me everything.
Fangirl.
I was fangirling. I think meeting authors in real life is like meeting a rock star.
I agree.
It's, incredible. So she's one of my favorites. I like Maggie Stiefvater. She writes the Raven Boys, the Raven Cycle. It's a great series of books. She She knows what she's doing. So, in young adult, those are my favorite. And then Mick Herron is one of my most favorite adult authors. I love, if I'm rereading books because they just bring me some type of comfort or joy, like you are, that's, I love that. So those are kind of my favorite. I mean, I just like, and then I just discover new authors all the time, like Helen Simonson. I'm like, wow, how have I not known your work? It's so good. So,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna give a shout out to an author I just discovered. And I don't know her personally. Rowan Baird wrote The Divorcees, which is a book set in 1951. Because I read it, I was like, oh, it's set in the same period as my historical. Let me read it. It is about women who live on the Reno, Nevada divorce ranches, which had popped up in the 40s and 50s so that women could get quickie divorces. You had to live in Nevada for 6 weeks to establish residency, and then you could go to court and get divorced really fast.
Interesting.
So a whole industry popped up around this need for women to get divorced. And so wealthy women could stay at these ranches, were like all, little resorts. They fed you, they gave you like an apartment, they had a pool, they would take you out to the casinos or to the bars, and you could kind of like socialize. And you would stay there for 6 weeks, and you would get a local lawyer, and then you can get divorced really fast. And a lot of time for these wealthy women, the ranches could be paid for by their fathers. They could be paid for by the soon-to-be ex-husband, whatever. But the writing for that novel was just fantastic. So if anybody's looking for a kind of dark, well done, very well done historical fiction, I'd recommend The Divorcees for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You said you've three children, correct?
I do.
You have a favorite book that you've read with them throughout their growing up? I know it's hard to choose a favorite. I shouldn't.
A lot. You know what, so I have 2 boys and a girl. My daughter is 10. She still reads because she doesn't have a phone. Honestly, once the kids my boys got cell phones, they were not interested in reading fiction anymore. And my oldest read a lot. He's had a copy of The Hunger Games for like years, and he hasn't opened it. He has to read Fahrenheit 451 for high school. I'm like, are you going to get on that? Like, get on that. My favorite books to read as a kid were my mom's favorite books to read. She used to go to the library and pick up books and just bring them home, and I would just read them. That's probably the only thing that I just blindly would take is here, read this book. And I was like, okay. I didn't have like preconceived notions about what I wanted to read and didn't want to read when I was a kid. Whereas my children do. Diary of a Wimpy Kid was really popular. And so my oldest wanted to read books like that. And believe it or not, there weren't as many as you would think. Fantasy is a huge, in middle grade, for example.
Yeah.
Fantasy is so big that if he was into the genre, I could just, like just an abundance of riches. But believe it or not, Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, the funny, realistic, kind of goofy storytelling that's geared toward boys, there wasn't as many as you would think. Like we had seen everything. So when I was a kid, I read very old school stuff because it was old to my mom even at the time, but like The Moffats by Eleanor Estes, like those books were written, I think, in the 1930s, and they were a nostalgic story for the author growing up at the turn of the century, but I read them. I loved them. Of course, I read Harry Potter, but I read it late because Harry Potter, the 4th book came out when I was in grad school. So I read it in college because that's when the books were around and stuff. But yeah, my boys are real into sports now. So if they're reading anything, it is sports blogs and articles. They're just huge fans. But my daughter right now, she likes graphic novels, loves graphic novels. So she reads a lot of that. And I love graphic novels as an entryway for kids to be reading, but I have found it hard now for her to just pick up a regular novel.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of text and she's flying through these books and there's a sense of accomplishment. And I get it. Like I read a novella not that long ago and I was like, oh, I finished a book.
Yeah.
Fast. Because it's a novella. It's short. And I was like, I felt great. I was like, oh, I think I read 3 books this month. That's a lot for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you see the people on TikTok and they're like, this is what I read in June. And they list like 47 books. I'm like, did you, I mean, okay, that's great, but wow.
Kate Quinn, famous Kate Quinn, the historical fiction author, the Alice Network. she's just the Briar Club's coming out. She reads like she showed an image of what she read for the month. It was like $30 or something. I don't know how she does it, because she's also reading research. I was floored, and then I felt like a slacker because I have downtime, but I'm like on my phone, and it's such an addiction. I just wish I could take it and yeet it into the sun, but you need this.
Well, it's not an excuse, but because I moved to Europe and I did not bring books with me, and I do not have physical books anymore because, customs and everything, it's a lot more difficult for authors to send me books. I read on my phone. So it's really easy to be reading on my phone and then be like, oh, what's going on TikTok? Or I'm going to scroll over here to this social media.
I deleted the TikTok app. I deleted it. I mean, my husband works, and he's like, you should delete the app. So I deleted the app.
Time suck.
It is a time suck. And then I had to put time restraints on myself, a 40-something-year-old woman, to like Instagram limit to an hour, Threads limit to an hour. Threads was I'm like, like when I go on Threads, the world is ending, and I get it, but it's not helping. None of this is productive conversation.
Doom scrolling, no, never.
It's not helpful. It's just like, this is not how we are helping each other. I was like, all right, let me just limit it. So, and that has helped me out a lot. And now I'm just taking my book with me. I'm taking it down to the kitchen so that if I have a few minutes, I'll read while I'm eating or drinking coffee. I started writing in the very early morning, handwriting, a draft for a book, not my historical, for just a couple, like maybe I'm doing 500 words for like 30 minutes kind of thing. Like that'll take forever to do. And I'm writing a hand draft just so I can try something completely new and just to see how it taps into my subconscious, but I'll do it in the morning, like no pressure. Nobody knows about this project, that kind of thing, but anything to get me away from the phone.
Yeah. I hear you. So this is sort of tangentially on topic, but off topic as well. Kimberly was talking about handwriting in the mornings, and that just made me think about me in college. I would always handwrite the first draft of any paper, not because I was trying to stay off social media, because I'm a Gen X. Social media did not exist when I was in college. Thank goodness. I don't know why I say thank goodness. I was the most boring person you've ever met. But social media did not exist when I was in college. But because I'm Gen X, I had computer classes in high school, but still was used to writing everything. And so that blinking cursor would just blink at me on the blank page, and I could not for the life of me write the first draft of anything. And I was a history major, so there's a lot of papers to write. Couldn't do it. Had to handwrite the first draft, and then the second draft would be when I typed in that handwritten draft into my computer word processor for the first few semesters, and then I would edit as I would go and kind of tweak as I started typing in what became the second draft. But I don't know, just kind of, I guess the theme of the day is nostalgia as I think back on different things. But we are going to take the third break of this podcast. When we come back, we'll be talking about where you can find Kimberly on the internet in terms of website and social media presence. Stay tuned. You are listening to and or watching the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back. Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. Before the break, Kimberly was talking about finding ways to be more present in her writing and less present on social media. Probably a lot of us have that issue in various forms and capacities. I know I certainly do, as we talked about. That does lead kind of ironically, I don't know if, am I using the Alanis Morissette version of ironic here? Possibly. But it does lead into my next question, which deals with social media. So let's return to the conclusion of my conversation with Kimberly. Internet presence, if people want to learn more about you and your books. So website, if you have one, and any, now I feel silly following up, but any social media that you're active on.
No, I mean, it's part of our lives.
You have to.
It's like drinking, right? Alcohol's available. A glass of wine is nice, but I'm not, like, you can't polish off a bottle of wine by yourself. Like, I have to learn to moderate the technological world around me. Anyway, you can find me online at KimberlyG, my last name's a mouthful. It's Giarratano, but my author name is my web address, and then all my social media is on there. I hang out on Instagram. I like Instagram, like I love when authors post things about their writing and their lives. So I'll hang out there, and I'm on Threads, and I'll jump on Twitter once in a while now. I really limited my Twitter interaction, but I find my time is just better spent if I am reading.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make sure that is what I'm mostly doing in my free time, is reading. And yeah, I mean, it's summer. Like, it's summer here. It's not all over the world, but it's in the Northeast. It's very hot. Yes.
Yeah. There's way too much heat going on in the US right now.
Oh, the humidity yesterday. So one other thing that I do besides write is I volunteer locally, because I have the time, and it is a privilege to do so, and I really enjoy it. It was so hot yesterday, though, outside in the Poconos. I'm like, this cannot be real life. It felt like Orlando in August. It just felt like a wall of moisture smacking you in the face. And then it rained last night. And you know how after it rained, you go out and you're like, oh, it cooled down a bit? Didn't do anything. It is humid, and I love heat because I can't stand winter, but this is something else. So it is summer. I'm just trying to enjoy being outside, not having, like, you forget how you wear a coat for like 75% of the year, and you're like, oh, it's so nice here.
Yeah, no, humidity changes everything.
I know. I went to I saw Tori Amos last year, and the opening act was from Arizona, and they're like, we're from Arizona and we can't believe your humidity. Like, we can't believe how hot it is here. I was like, yeah, that's the
I grew up in Montana, and then I moved to Texas, and I never got used to the fact that it did not cool off when it rained. Like, in Montana, if it rains, you're putting on a coat, you are putting on socks. It's cool. It's not. And then in Texas, it's like bath water.
What's the heat like where you are now?
Here it was 90 2 days ago, but now it's in the 80s. We get 300 days a year of sun, and the average temperature is mid 70s. So pretty darn nice. So
I was in Europe during that record-breaking heat wave where it killed all those people. It was 2003. I was there. I did a month in Spain, in Salamanca, and it was so hot, like over 100.
Yeah.
And I remember getting on the phone with my mom, and I'm like, I just feel so weird. She's like, you're not hydrating enough. I'm like, I carry a liter of water, like a frozen, or 3 liters of water. We'd freeze it and then we'd take it with us to class, but it wasn't enough water. Like, the cognitive decline when you are that hot, don't understand. Like, I just remember that. I'm like, now I know why all these people died. Because they don't also, like, going into a supermarket to stand next to the freezer section just to get some relief, because you can't get any relief. There's no AC. But that's what I remember. Yep.
And I'm still not, I've been here over 2 years, and I still cannot get Celsius in my brain. So I say it's 90, and people look at me like, I don't know what that means. And I say, 40, 35, I don't remember. 35 doesn't seem hot to me, but it is.
converting to Celsius every time I have a conversation with my friend who's English. But she knows Fahrenheit, so she'll be like, it's 35, and I'll be like, well, what is that? And she's like, it's 90 something.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I kind of can do it. I can do it that way, roughly, but I can't do it from 90 to Celsius.
Learned
So.
in math. We did.
Yeah, math. No one said there'd be math. Back to books and writing. Is there anything that we have not covered, Kimberly, that you want to make sure that you highlight?
No, I just I hope people read this, watch this, get the books from the library. I can't stress that enough. And if your library doesn't have it, make them buy it. Especially, and if any writers are watching that, like watching and listening, like I would encourage you to encourage people to use the library as much as possible. There was some discussion not that long ago on social media about writers, authors in particular, like we don't need to foist sales, upon the readership. Libraries pay more for your book. And then it gets read by a ton of people. Like having your book in a library, which is a privilege not everyone gets to, especially if you're an indie author. My indie titles were not really available in the library. It wasn't until I was traditionally published that I could see my books in libraries, because there's a distribution network involved, and it makes it easy for libraries to get your books. But, seeing more libraries carry my books and knowing that they read the first book, they're going to want the second book and read the third book. Like, I just can't stress it enough. Like, really support your local libraries. They need it so badly.
And readers we're addicted. So readers will read a library book and then they'll buy it because they want it. So yes, libraries are a good gateway for your books selling.
Yeah. So, if somebody says they got your book from the library, you just be like, that is amazing. I get giddy. I get giddy when I my books in a library. I went to Seattle for a conference, and we just happened to be by the public library, and I went and found my book. I was giddy.
Nice. I love it.
That's all I want to do.
Well, I want to thank you for taking time out of your weekend to talk to me about Billie and the series and writing in general. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff.
Thank you once again for Kimberly for joining me. You can tell she says she loves talking about this stuff, and you can absolutely tell she was so much fun to talk to. The joy of writing in her books clearly comes through in her conversations about her current works, her works in progress, her past works, etc. So it was a lot of fun to talk to Kimberly. As I said at the beginning, if you are looking for a good mystery series, you want the first two books, they are out. The Billie Levine series is a good place to start. I need to create a graphic with my eek factor to give you a better idea. This one is fast-paced. It has some great characters in it. Not high on it's going to keep you up at night. It's going to keep you turning those pages. There's some suspense. There are some moments that you're thinking, "Whew, how are we getting out of this one?" But it's not graphic or violent but it's a mystery. They're dead bodies. So I would assume that you would be prepared for that going in, but lower on the eek factor for me, which I appreciate, especially because I'm coming off of 5 interviews in a row where I'm talking about thrillers. Next, the one that I'm going to talk to you about in just a moment, please join me on Friday, is another thriller. But for me, thrillers I'm coming to appreciate more. Never, I think, in my life have I read 5 thrillers in a row. So this has been a really fun exercise because they've all been different levels on the eek factor, right? Got to make that graphic. And it's been really fun to read different types of mysteries, different types of suspense, different types of thriller. And it's been a fun exercise for me. So speaking of that, I hope that you will join me for the next episode when I'll be speaking with author S.B. Caves. We're talking about his thriller, Honeycomb. This one is higher on the eek factor. When I was sent the email initially asking if I wanted to have SB on the podcast, it was described as Big Brother meets Black Mirror. That is a very good one-line description of this book. It is there's a lot that's going on. You're going to have to tune into the interview to find out more about this book. But you can see 7 Days, 6 Strangers, 1 Experimental Drug. 2 little teasers for you. those 3 lines, and then Big Brother meets Black Mirror. So join me on Friday's episode when I will be speaking with SB. As a reminder, in terms of Friday's episode, if you like, follow, subscribe on whatever platform you are listening to or watching this podcast on, you're going to receive a notification anytime there is a new episode. That way, when we have 2 episodes in a week, which we do this week and again next week, cool, you're going to get a notification that there is a new episode out. And when I'm having weird weeks and they come out on the wrong day, you'll get a notification that there's a new episode. So like, follow, subscribe. Also, leave a positive review. That really helps the algorithm. Just like leaving a review for your favorite authors really helps get their books into the hands of more readers. Leaving a review of this podcast is going to get it out to more readers, and I greatly, greatly appreciate that. That's another way that you can support the podcast. Don't stress. It doesn't have to be anything crazy. It can be 1 line. It can be whatever works best for you. I appreciate it, whatever it is in you to do to support this podcast. Also, you can find the podcast on social media: Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. Love interacting with you all. So if you do come follow the podcast, and of course me by extension, tell me what you're reading. Tell me which authors that I've interviewed that you have read and enjoyed. Tell me what's on your TBR. You know, I say this every week. I'm nosy. Come and feed my nosiness in terms of your TBRs and your favorite authors, etc. Love to just add to my never shrinking, always growing books that I want to read someday. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode. Please join me again on Friday. In the meantime, whatever life is handing you this week, I hope it is handing you plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you so much.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to